In this section of chapter number 7, we're going to talk about how we administer elections and the importance of why we have the laws that are put in place and the procedures in which we try to make sure that we have fair administration of each one of our elections. There are over 500,000 office holders in the United States that are elected by the American people. And so because of that, there is many opportunities for things to get into the system in which we don't want to be there, or that could cause some sort of discredit to the election system, or some sort of problems that could arise through that. And so our goal is to have a free, honest, and accurate administration of the election. So that way, our elections are done well. So the state and federal government works together to create laws in order to make sure that our elections are done free, honest, and are done accurately. Most of the election laws are state laws, but there are many federal election laws that go along with that. The Constitution allows for Congress the power to set the time, places, and manner of holding elections for its own organization. Congress also gets the privilege of setting the time and date for the presidential election. And so they regulate a lot of the things regarding the presidential election and the national elections. So the state then controls a lot of the local elections and the statewide elections. Because of the way that Congress has this power to do so, they have determined that the best time to have these elections are on the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November, and national elections happen in even-numbered years. So that seems a little bit strange to put this type of definition to when is election day. But we didn't want to have election day happen on the first of the month, because many people at one time in our nation's history would pay all their bills on the first of the month. And it often meant trips to the post office, trips to the businesses themselves, sometimes trips to the bank. And they didn't want to add another thing that might cause people to avoid going to the polls. And so they said first of the month is out, we're not going to do on the first. That's why we have first Tuesday following the first Monday in November. So November 2nd, that's an acceptable day for an election if it happens to fall on a Tuesday. But if November 1st is on a Tuesday, then election day is going to happen on November the 8th, and that's the reason why. Now, the reason of why Tuesday, why November, there's a video clip that I'm going to attach into Canvas that will explain a little bit more of the history behind that. So I'm not going to take the time to do that here in this video, but I encourage you to watch that. It's not a long one, but it helps to solidify more of those ideas of why we do that then and there. A couple of other of the state and federal laws that are required here is that you are required to have a secret ballot, and it doesn't say the method by which the votes need to be tallied or the votes need to be cast. They could be paper ballot, they could be electronic, they could be digital, and there are states that are trying to determine should we go to online voting and give that an opportunity to give people more access to voting. However, right now, online voting is not an option. There are just too many security issues with that, and so all of it is done at a polling location, either by paper or by digital voting. You also need to know the idea of provisional ballot here. In 2002, Congress passed a law that was the Help America Vote Act. You don't need to necessarily know that law, but you need to know the consequence of it, where there were certain voters that were denied access to vote due to a clerical error or due to a failed registration. And so Congress decided they were going to institute a provisional ballot, which means that you get the opportunity to vote, but that vote has been contested. And so they will set that ballot aside, and they will try to sort out the problem after the election day has taken place. They will get higher level of election officials to look over that and find out, is this a legitimate problem, or was it just a mistake in the office in which that vote should be counted? Now, if they question your residency or they question your age, they will try to verify that. And if they determine there's not enough evidence to be able to verify your voting eligibility, then they're not going to count that ballot. But if they do find out, oh yeah, wait, we made a mistake, then they will count that ballot and it will be included in the total number of votes. Election day happens on that first Tuesday following the first Monday in November in even-numbered years, and these election days are currently, each state has the opportunity to set their own election hours. The Government does not tell us exactly how long or when those need to be open. Typically, they're open for 12 hours, though, and most states will go from 6 in the morning to 6 at night or 7 in the morning to 7 at night in their own time zone. Some have argued that Election Day should be a national holiday, and we should not have school, we should not have work in order for people to be able to vote. Personally, I don't think that's going to solve our non-voter problem. I think you're going to have a lot of people who decide to take an extra vacation day and go do something else, and it's going to actually result in fewer voters coming out to vote. The reason why I think that is because we have opportunity for people to go vote early. We call that early voting, and almost every state provides an opportunity for people to go before Election Day to cast their ballot. If there's a person who doesn't want to wait in long lines, or a person who is going to have to work, they're not going to be able to get to the polls on Election Day, they can go vote at any number of places prior to Election Day. I know in the state of Indiana, they open up 28 days before election, and you can vote on the weekends, you can vote at certain hours during the weekdays. It is a limited hours that they do have it open, but you can check your local precinct and find out where and when you can do that. Another very important aspect here is the coattail effect. When we are choosing we're choosing people to represent us in the election, the coattail effect essentially occurs when the enthusiasm for one nominee or one candidate translates into support for other party members. So I'll use the example of President Obama. When he was running for office, he was extremely popular, especially when he ran again in 2012. He'd already served 4 years as president. And so when he ran in 2012, anybody who was able to associate with President Obama was automatically given some credibility, was given some popularity, and often was able to win an election. And so we call that the coattail effect, where you are riding on somebody else's success to help gain political office for yourself or gain some advantage for yourself. And so that works in both the positive and the negative. Sometimes you can associate yourself with somebody else, and that can actually deter people from voting for you. And we call that a negative coattail effect or reverse coattail effect. That's never one that you want to be a part of. We've mentioned this term precinct before. Precinct is simply a local voting term that divides up the local voters into a small group. Typically that group somewhere between 500 to 1,000 voters, depending on the size of the city. But it makes it easier for poll workers to be able to organize registrations, and so you just need to know that the precinct is a small division in local government of voters and their registration. So our ballot is secret. Nobody has to know who you vote for. You get to vote in secret, and you never have to explain why you voted for a person, who you voted for. That is part of our election law. We get a lot of the ideas for our election system from the Australian ballot, and there are 4 main qualifications to the Australian ballot that I would say is a really good section here for you to make sure that you pay close attention to and that you know what makes up the Australian ballot. First of all, an Australian ballot is paid for out of public expense. It's not sponsored by an organization, it's not paid for by an individual. Therefore, we can say that it is taxpayer money, it is totally neutral, there is no bias involved whatsoever in the voting system, those who count the ballots, or the results. So public expense is a huge part of what makes the Australian ballot the way it is. It also must list all the candidates. You can't leave somebody off the ballot just because you don't like them or just because you don't think they have a chance. If they have qualified and met all of the requirements, they must be on the ballot to qualify here as an Australian ballot. Thirdly, you must make the ballot available to all qualified voters. That can be made available digitally. Some states will mail sample ballots to their voters. Others will make it available in City Hall, but you have access to it ahead of time to know who is on the ballot so you can be informed and prepared to vote on Election Day. And then lastly, it is secretly marked. You have the opportunity to vote for whoever you want to vote for in a private booth with nobody else looking over your shoulder and nobody else asking who you want to vote for. So it is secretly marked, and that's why we have the balloting system either on paper or electronically the way that we do today. So when you go to vote, you're probably going to see one of 2 different styles of ballot. And so when you look at the ballot, it'll be organized either as an office group ballot, which is what you'll see on the screen here in the top right corner. That is organized by the office they are seeking. So you'll see the box up there for U.S. Senator. And underneath that box, you have all the different candidates in there in alphabetical order, but then it also lists their political party beneath the candidate. So you're voting for U.S. Senator, and you're choosing from all those candidates who you want to select for that particular office. The party column ballot is the ballot you see on the bottom right corner. That is where you have all the Republican candidates in the left column, the Democratic candidates in the right, and you'll probably have a few others further off to the right that are more minor parties. But you'll notice that the top line then is your vote for governor, and you choose between Republican or Democratic. And then you have lieutenant governor, and so on and so forth down the list. Those that argue that this is confusing or this is perhaps an unfair ballot, it may lead people to vote straight ticket on these type of ballots as opposed to the office group ballot that can be a little bit more confusing but doesn't encourage people to vote straight ticket as the party column ballot has been criticized to do. Now we move on here to a very important section on money and elections. So I'm not going to go as deep into this section as what your textbook might. I want to give you the basic principles that you need to know so you're informed and you understand why money is so important to running campaigns and elections. So money is super important for any candidate to try to get elected. Some have argued that if candidates cannot raise money, they're never going to succeed in the political scene. And to some extent, that's really true, because if you can't get enough money and supporters to help out your cause, you're not going to get your name out there, and therefore you're not going to have enough votes to win. So money really drives a lot of these candidates and their campaigns. Despite the fact that we have had efforts to try to reform the way that we have spent money on elections, the Supreme Court has had to step in to try to fix some of the bad laws that we put in place. So Congress recognized there was a problem with individuals who were raising money and spending huge sums of money on these campaigns. Some would get elected, some would not, but all that money would just be gone. And so they tried to enact a number of laws in which it would restrict voters from donating a certain amount of money to any one candidate, or it would also restrict candidates from donating to their own cause. And so many argued that this was a violation of their freedom of speech. And they said, well, the way I spend my money is in fact a freedom of speech. It's an expression of my opinion. And so if I want to endorse a candidate and I want to spend my money on him, then you can't tell me when or where or who I can give that money to. And that was the issue in Buckley versus Valeo. When it goes to the Supreme Court, it was trying to determine, is the way I spend my money a reflection of the freedom of speech in Amendment number 1? And in Buckley versus Valeo, they said, yes, it actually is a freedom of speech. And so I want you to know two things that come out of this Supreme Court case. Number one is that it allowed for candidates to spend as much money as they want on their own campaign. So when it came to campaign spending, if you could fund it yourself out of your own private money, you can spend as much as you want. That's your money. It's a freedom of speech. Do what you want with it. That does tend to give an advantage to those who are wealthier, to give them a head start in these campaigns. Now, it also clarified the donation system a little bit better. It did say that Congress had the ability to limit donations to an individual through a campaign season. But it also opened the door for donations to a political party and said, well, you can't give over X amount of dollars to the candidate, but you can give almost an unlimited amount of money to the campaign political party. And we'll talk about that here in just a moment of the difference between those two. But Buckley versus Valeo tried to clarify that just a little bit better for us, even though today there's still many ways around that. And so the court here did allow a number of other restrictions on campaigns, which we're not going to go into here, but I want you to know some of the basics of what that case did. So if there are restrictions on individuals giving to a political campaign or giving to an individual, and if there's no money in my pocket, how in the world am I going to get elected? Where are my sources of income? How am I going to get all this money I need to buy commercials and to buy my bus to drive all over that's got my picture on the side of it and my campaign slogan? And how am I going to pay my staff? Well, these are some other sources of income. I might go for some private funding. I might have some wealthy friends who they're going to help organize my campaign. Now, they cannot donate all of their money to me. They'd have to donate some of it to the political party, who then could use it to support me. But if I could fund it privately, if I could raise money for myself on my own, then I could use that money. Or I could look for a PAC, or Political Action Committee. So a Political Action Committee, they are a group here who are trying to make something happen politically after they've donated money to that individual or to that party. So a Political Action Committee would be an interest group that they are going to give donations to the party or to an individual with the understanding that when that individual gets elected, they are going to provide something in return. It's all done out in the open, at least it's supposed to be, and this is an understood process. And so different political action committees will contact politicians and find out, hey, do you need money? Well, yeah, I do need money. So I'm going to give you X amount of dollars. And in exchange for that, when you get elected, we expect you to fight for our cause. So that's what a political action committee will do. You will probably hear a lot about them in the news as we get closer to election season. But they are all part of interest groups, and they're able to do that. You could also search for public funding. The federal and state treasuries usually have funds available to help out political campaigns. And a lot of people have criticized this public funding because they believe the money could be used better elsewhere. And they also believe that if somebody cannot get enough donations on their own, then they really shouldn't be taken seriously and they should not be using taxpayer money to do this. I'll let you decide on your own whether you think it's a good idea or not. Those that have argued in favor of it say that it means there's less political action committees that have to get involved and less corruption that could potentially take place. Now, Congress also determines the difference between hard and soft money and the amount of money that you're allowed to donate to candidates versus the party. So soft money is the money that is given to elect a candidate. That means that there's a limitation on how much money a candidate is able to, let's strike that, I said that backwards. Hard money is the money meant to elect the candidate that goes directly to them. So there is a limitation on how much hard money can be given to that individual. So soft money is money that's given to the party or given to the organization, and that specifically needs to go toward party building activities. Well, that's pretty broad, and it's not very clear as to what could be qualified as a party building activity. So since soft money is unlimited or nearly unlimited, they can give as much money as they want to the Democratic Party. They can then use that money for any sort of party building activity they want to. That could include recruiting candidates. That could include things like voter registration drives. It could include advertisement that is going to help get people to vote or get people to support the party. And indirectly, that is now going to help out the candidate that they have endorsed. So that's one of the ways around donating to a candidate. You can donate the money to the political party instead. So hope this has been helpful. Go back and review through the textbook with anything that maybe I didn't explain as clearly as necessary for your understanding, or come back, talk to me, we can talk through it.